What nine NFL teams have the trickiest fantasy football situations for wide receiver in 2023? It's time to break it down right here, right now, as we do another offseason preview on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. Busy offseason ahead. We got some massive trade rumors. We talked about Aaron Rodgers' destinations. We've talked about free agency and the rankings of the players there in the unrestricted realm. Well, now we're going to look at the wide receiver biggest question marks around the league. We did this with quarterbacks as well, if you missed that show. These are the 9 teams that I pulled out that we want some answers from the most important pass catching position in the NFL. No offense to tight ends, but these teams really need help at that position wide receiver. So we're going to look at it, and we're also a little bit shaky about it. There's a lot of good situations for fantasy football in terms of the top wide receiver and the number 2 receiver. Sometimes you have a 1A and 1B. But there's a lot of teams that are looking to give us some better answers at that position for fantasy. So we'll look at the top 9 teams that we want some questions being answered for this offseason. We'll do that on today's show. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first of the day. We're free and available to you on all platforms. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook in the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. All right, we'll start with the number 1 team with the biggest wide receiver questions. It would be your New York Giants, and the Giants really in a tough spot here. Basically, everyone's a free agent. Wan'Dale Robinson coming off a major injury. They want to break free from the Kenny Galladay contract. Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton. These guys may not be back. They had to end up there with Isaiah Hodgins as their number 1 option. He's an okay receiver, but he's not a number 1. So Giants are going to be in the market for number 1. They, of course, traded Kadarius Toney to the Chiefs in the middle of the season, so maybe Robinson can be what Toney was, but a completely different offense here with Brian Dable and Mike Kafka and leadership that brought in Toney. So blowing it up here, Galladay didn't work out. Slayton was okay. He flashed at times. Shepard simply can stay healthy. Robinson also coming off a major knee injury. So they need some help here. And Sterling Shepard, I mean, he's been reliable over the years as their Odell Beckham Jr. kind of choice there at wide receiver, but he's been hurt often, and he's near the end of his career as well. So the Giants need wide receiver answers. Tied to it in the first round of the draft as a wild card team in the NFC, losing in the divisional round to the Eagles. So when you look at the Giants, they should be aggressive. There's a lot of great receivers we know in the draft again. We look at Quentin Johnston of TCU. We got Jackson Smith and the Jigba from Ohio State. You've got Kayshon Boutte from LSU. These are some of the options in the first round there that the Giants could target. They can also wait later in the draft, second round, and find a value there. So the Giants are going to be going after wide receiver. We'll see how aggressive they want to be in trading for DeAndre Hopkins. Cortland Sutton's out there on the block. Brandon Cooks might be available as well, made by the Texans. So we'll see where the Giants are. But right now, there's not anything we reliably are looking at in this receiving core. Hodgins gave us a few moments last year as being the best default option there down the stretch for the Giants once they really didn't have anybody else. Wan'Dale Robinson does have some upside, but he's more of a complementary quick speed gadget player. He needs someone else there to stand up as a number 1. So I think the Giants will be in the market for a number 1 receiver, and that receiver will have immediate appeal in fantasy because he's going to be the go-to guy, presumably for Daniel Jones, who they'll try to bring back here. And Saquon Barkley is also in the mix for them. So the Giants have a big void for a fantasy emerger there at wide receiver. The Texans also have that opportunity here. Brandon Cooks, we talked about him being on the move. Looks like he might be traded for a fourth time from a fourth team, so something to look at there. He's already been dealt from the Saints and Patriots and Rams. So again, Cooks only 29 years old, so still has some good value here as a versatile receiver. We'll see where it ends up. We know he was a very reliable fantasy receiver just 2 years ago, but kind of checked out, got hurt in Houston last year. So things are going to be in flux here. Nico Collins also had that nagging growing injury. He can stay on the field. Chris Moore ended up having some moments, but he's a free agent, the older Ravens transport here. So the Texans should also be in line for a wide receiver to attach to their new starting quarterback, whether it's Bryce Young or CJ Stroud in the draft. That looks like the best option here at the number 2 overall pick behind the Bears. And again, they need some receiving help. Collins is more of a complimentary 2. I think they move Cooks, Moore not being in the mix. They need to really think about number 1. So would they be in the mix for Jordan Addison? He is the number 1 guy that you look at from USC by way of Pittsburgh. So the Giants, I don't know if they'll be in range to get him, but the Texans certainly would be, and maybe pair him with our franchise quarterback. So something to look at there. The Texans have some untapped upside there at wide receiver as well. Speaking of the Texans picking second, the Bears are picking first overall. They're not going to go after wide receiver with that pick, but they can't just feel totally confident with Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool being their top 2 receivers. They need some help. Claypool can be a big slot on the inside or a field stretch on the outside, so they need a versatile guy to put in with those 2. And again, they could be looking at those veterans. So we talked about Hopkins, Sutton, any of those types there to pair with Justin Fields. And now Fields has had decent chemistry with Mooney, but Mooney just has not been on the field a lot with his injuries. And what's the bottom line is Byron Pringle is a free agent here. They thought he was going to have a key role in the slot, but that was before they traded for Claypool in the middle of the season with the Steelers. So I think they want to go forward with Mooney, Claypool, but they need one more weapon to complement those guys in Cole Kmet. Here, I would say Mooney right now, if he returns healthy with the history of Fields, has a better chance to produce, but something we're going to definitely watch the Bears. They definitely need an upgrade at that position and add some dynamic playmakers to that passing game. All right, there you have a look at the teams with the biggest wide receiver questions, the Giants, Texans, and Bears. We'll get into 6 more teams that have similar questions, whether they're trying to round out their starting spots or look for a number 1 or look for a number 2 and some help that's reliable there. So we'll get into all that here in our next 2 segments on Locked On Fantasy Football for this Wednesday. We told you at the top, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL might be over here, but it's the midway point of the NBA season right after the All-Star break, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's number 1 sportsbook. New customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's why it's such a good time now. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. So a lot of excitement coming for the NBA second half down the stretch. Kevin Durant finally in action for the Suns, so that should add some scoring and playmaking excitement for that team. But FanDuel lets you even combine your bets for a chance at even bigger payout in the same game parlay. Maybe you're looking at that with Durant's points and maybe some of his other stat sheet stuffing with his rebounds and all that. So good stuff all around with Durant and the Suns, and maybe Suns-related same game parlay has also become more appealing with him in the mix with Devin Booker and Chris Paul. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA as well as the NFL. All right, it is time to continue the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Our 4th neediest team at wide receiver, the New England Patriots. Now, they've been trying to mishmash this for a while with Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne. Jacoby Myers, however, is now a free agent, the one guy that was reliable, first working in slot as a possession guy, then becoming valuable outside as well, and also a touchdown scorer all of a sudden last season. So it's tough here for the Patriots. Would they be interested in bringing back Brandon Cooks? Are they going to make an aggressive move for Hopkins? That's what they have to look at. Mac Jones kind of dwindling from his first season, pretty nice Pro Bowl season, but that was with Josh McDaniels. The new coaching staff was great. Now readjusting to another one. Do they just expand the 2 tight end looks here with Bill O'Brien, who once made that a specialty in New England? And you see a lot of Hunter Henry and Jonas Smith being a big part of this passing game. We'll have to see how it plays out. But the Patriots wide receiver, of course, leaves a lot to be desired here, and Mac Jones needs some help there to turn it around. So I definitely see the Patriots making some moves at wide receiver. They haven't had the best success at first-round receivers. We know that, including most recent one, N'Keal Harry, who's kind of bounced around, was on the Bears roster last year. So we'll see. The Patriots may be better off just plugging some guys together, moving it around here as they already do, but that's also less appealing for fantasy football. The Panthers have DJ Moore, then they drop off to Terrace Marshall Jr. here after that. So Marshall can be pretty special, but it's a new quarterback situation here coming up, likely with Sam Darnold being a free agent, Baker Mayfield long gone. Probably not going to be seeing Matt Corral under center. So Panthers, new offense with Frank Reich, a little Rams twinge. Maybe they go after Cooks here, having that connection with LA. So a lot of things that you can think about, or Allen Robinson to get shipped off to the Panthers to get something back here for the Rams. So there's a lot of things that can be looked at with the Panthers. But DJ Moore right now needs a quarterback who can get on the ball, facilitate him for big plays. Terrace Marshall Jr. has some promise here, but they're not too deep beyond that. So we want someone to step up there to complement DJ Moore with Carolina. That's going to be pretty critical for that new quarterback and new offense with the right going forward. And the last team we look at, this is the sixth team. We do have three more to go that are less concerning at wide receiver, but the Tennessee Titans definitely are worrisome here with the Treylon Burks being their first rounder last year. They didn't have much behind him after the A.J. Brown trade. They settled with Robert Woods returning. They have Nick Westbrook-Akine, but there's just not a lot there with the Titans. So they want to open up the passing game a little bit more. I think that's what you're going to get here, to not be stodgy and stick with the running game. It can only take them so far. They've seen the ceiling of that. So they want to be able to open things off play action, throw downfield a little bit. So Titans in contention here for a top wide receiver on the move, and we'll see if they can make something work here. But they also have a shady situation because we want Treylon Burks to be consistent as a wide receiver 3. That's not happening unless he gets a little bit of help as kind of a traditional alpha receiver in that offense for the Titans. All right, that's teams 1 through 6 now. Giants, Texans, Bears, Patriots, Panthers, Titans. We got 3 more teams that have some significant wide receiver question marks here for 2023 as fantasy meets reality on Locked On Fantasy Football. Don't forget to listen to all our great shows on the network, Locked On NFL, covering you all the way through the draft, as well as Locked On NFL Draft, covering you through the most important time of the year for the prospects as they get ready for the scouting combine in Indianapolis next week. So a lot of good stuff, Locked On NFL, Locked On NFL Draft. We also have our sister basketball show that you can check out for more FanDuel action. That's Locked On Fantasy Basketball. So a lot of offerings here through the NFL offseason with NFL never stopping through free agency draft and all these other leagues, needing that day-to-day coverage every day. So good stuff all around here for you to check out on Sporting News and at Locked On Network. Okay, it's time to close the show looking at the final 3 teams here that we're looking at for the show. And the one thing that you have here with the wide receivers, some need number 2s. And you look at the Falcons here. Drake London is a very good number 1, but they drop off to Olamide Zaccheaus after him. Calvin Ridley's not returning. They traded him to the Jaguars to be part of that mix. So the Falcons have Drake London. They've got Kyle Pitts. Maybe need that third receiver here to really put your team in motion. Cordell Patterson, I think that's it for him as running back. And Tyler Algier will have a lead role. Patterson maybe being the backup running back there. But I don't see Patterson suddenly stepping in to be the number 2 receiver in truth here. So when you look at it, Drake London needs help. Zaccheaus is a little slot guy that's pretty good, but they need a clear number 2 here to take pressure off London in that particular position, and Pitts can draw attention as well. So London, Pitts, they need to complete those triplets there for whoever their starting quarterback is. Right now, you'd say it's Desmond Ridder, but there's a chance they could deal for Lamar Jackson, something to think about there. Maybe be less scaled with that option. So really interesting to see, but having a third guy to catch passes would be huge here for the Falcons. Number 8 on the list, the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, Michael Gallup was a bit disappointing last year. CeeDee Lamb was very productive, but they expand the role for Jalen Tolbert? And they give him more opportunities. James Washington do more in week 2 than in season 2 that has more complete health on the side, and they go after more wide receivers there. So something to watch for sure with the Cowboys. They're very limited, especially with the transition from Kellen Moore to Brian Schottenheimer. We love Kellen Moore as the top hire. there as an offense coordinator did not like the Sean Neimer move, so it can make them more conservative, limit the passing opportunities and downfield shots for Dak Prescott. They kind of sit on Prescott throwing to pretty much Lamb and Gallup for the most part, and then some tight end work behind them, and not having a lot in wide receivers. So something to think about there. But the Cowboys do need to address wide receiver in more form here to have some impact in that position for Prescott. The Chiefs are going to have to deal with some free agent issues. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be trying to resign there, but you have some youngsters, Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney. How do you work them into your offense a little bit better next year? But the Chiefs do have some questions there, trying to replay things out. Marcus Valdes-Scantling is their deep threat, but there are rumors that the Chiefs were aggressive last year and wanted maybe A.J. Brown, so they could think a little bit bigger this year at wide receiver, something to look at there to give us some more of that bona fide number one in the Tyreek Hill mold playing off Travis Kelce. So definitely the Chiefs at the lesser need. That's why the Falcons, Cowboys, and Chiefs are this last segment of the 7, 8, 9 teams there with the wide receiver concerns. But it's more of an interest here. We want to see what the Chiefs do and how they line up the receiving corps and see if we can navigate more consistent production out of this team here in 2023. So looking forward to what you can get there. So recapping really the Giants, need to clean things up there with their wide receivers. You had just not a lot the old coaching staff left there with the cupboard. There's just too many aging guys, too many overpriced guys. So definitely the Giants are interested. The Texans rebuilding that core. Maybe they settle the tight ends a little bit there with Brevin Jordan and the rest. So as they're going through this flux of wide receiver, or they got to wait a little bit until the draft, then that's how they think about it. When you look at the Bears here, they're a team that has some wide receiver talent, but you have a true number one there. That's a concern between Mooney and Claypool, and I don't think you do. I think Claypool is more big slot. Mooney is more of a field stretching number two. Look at the Patriots. So will they clean up their mess, starting with the free agency of Myers and a lot of questions with just slapping receivers together from other teams. Panthers, again, do like Marshall to do something behind DJ Moore, but more really into quarterback here to produce and one that has good chemistry. The Titans, Traylon Burks, he needs somebody else out there. Maybe it's Chinga Konkwu having a bigger role, but they could use a third guy. Like we said, it's always important to have that third option there because you can cover two guys and maybe take them out of the game, but having that third option is going to be key. So Titans could get another good guy there that you look at that has a good pass ratio, that has good hands there that's going to help their team for sure. So Titans coming there. You have the Falcons. We mentioned them. Drake London needing a complimentary outside target there. They could also be an inside option. The Cowboys, just not a lot of wide receiver depth, especially if they're burning Jalen Tolbert and not seeing him enough, or just trying to go in that direction. So you look at it with the Cowboys, there's definitely some upside to be had there. The Chiefs, again, they made it work without Tyreek Hill, but apparently they wanted A.J. Brown last year. So a lot of things to look at here with that position in fantasy football. So good stuff all around here with the wide receiver neediest teams here in 2023. These are teams that we need some clarity on before we know where to invest at this position here in 2023. So we'll get that as we go throughout the offseason. We'll have more goings and comings here to kind of settle each team's depth chart of the most important position. And the key for us in fantasy football is being able to extract that information and get the best their options and not reach, not just say somebody's on the best of a bad situation, but really look for a person who can dominate that situation. So definitely all kinds of things to consider when you're targeting your fantasy football wide receivers for 2023. Again, looking forward to these answers there. But if you're looking for maybe a couple more that need a little cleanup here, Bucks, so they just simply keep Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They need number 3 there to really feel good about that. That's what you're looking at. The Jets, they're sitting on Garrett Wilson. I really like him, but does Elijah Moore come back in the fold as a key receiver? What do they do there with Corey Davis? They can get out of his contract easily. You got potential for Brandon Cooks, but you also have Rodgers coming in. So there's a lot of things you have to answer there if you're those two teams as well. So those are kind of the honorable mentions here, but definitely going back down in order for the biggest quarterback questions here, or the wide receiver questions tied to quarterback. Giants number 1, Texans number 2, Bears number 3, Patriots 4, Panthers 5, Titans 6, Falcons 7, Cowboys 8, and Chiefs 9. So that's about it. Everyone has something that they have to figure out wide receiver, but those other teams in the NFL seem pretty set here for sure in 2023. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen day. We're free and available to you on all platforms. We'll come back tomorrow with another show for you. Thursday, we'll complete the week strong on Friday as well as we go to offseason scouting mode here for you on Locked On Fantasy Football, part of the Locked On NFL Network. So really happy that you're here for the ride. And again, check out Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Great show there. I mean, you have an unparalleled host there with Josh Lloyd, really gathering and giving you the insight you need there to dominate your NBA fantasy league. So check it out. It's Locked On Fantasy Basketball. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you tomorrow as we break down another hot topic for offense and fantasy football in the NFL.